I'm sorry, I know he likes to take credit for a lot of things. He can't take credit for what a prime minister did in the 1980s and 90s.
Carney is getting called out. Welcome back to Moose on Loose. My name's David. Today we've got Pierre Poilievre calling out Carney, saying the Conservatives have been waiting to help the Liberals get a better deal for Canada. What does Mark Carney have to say? It's crickets. Meanwhile, Mark Carney trying to take credit for the fact that CUSMA exists, and he gets called out again on that. We got a bunch of other stuff here. Let's jump into this. Starting this one off, we've got Canadians can put their elbows down and keep their heads high. Coming from the Globe and Mail. Oh yeah? They're trying to change the narrative now. Also got this one. 3 provinces, 1 territory have made Pharmacare deals. Ottawa won't say if others are coming. Those 3 provinces and territories are, it says right here, BC, Manitoba, PEI, and Yukon. Maybe it's time to cut the Pharmacare. We're broke. Moving ahead here, we've got Pierre Poilievre responding to the government's move to drop retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods. Listen to Poilievre call out Mark Carney, saying Carney has not even attempted to work with any of the other parties, including the Conservatives, to drop the tariffs.
And we also continue to extend our hand to Prime Minister Carney to work together to get a good deal with the Americans. I promised that, and I offered that to him multiple times directly. My Shadow Minister of Canada-U.S. Affairs has said the same thing to her counterpart. So far, no response. The Liberals seem to want to play partisan games and score political points rather than working with all parties to get a good deal for Canada. So my message to Mr. Carney, put partisanship aside and work with all parties to get an actual deal with the Americans that stands up for Canada's interest. We have to judge Mr. Carney by his performance, and not by the standards I set, by the ones that he set out for himself. So let's do that today. First, I was happy to hear that he got the president on the phone. I know that Mr. Carney has been trying to do that now for about a month, and today the president accepted his call.
This is so savage. I mean, it's true, though. Mark Carney's not getting a deal. He's not even working with the Conservatives. It's almost like Mark Carney doesn't want to get a deal.
And the Prime Minister took the opportunity to make a series of very generous concessions to President Trump. And I was expecting that when the call was reported, that we'd find that President Trump had given us something in return, that Mr. Carney, being the negotiator he promised he would be, that he would get something after giving something, but not so. Today we learned that it has been yet another capitulation and climb down by Mark Carney.
You notice on X, all the Liberals having a meltdown about this because they're asking each other, like, what's going on here? We're getting nothing in return. What is Mark Carney doing? They're all starting to have a meltdown. Meanwhile, the rest of us Conservatives just sitting here shaking our heads because we know this is a big scam. He's here to enrich himself.
His elbows have mysteriously gone missing. And this call follows on other concessions. He promised during the campaign he would have dollar-for-dollar retaliation. He pulled that back. He made concessions on the military while getting nothing in return. He pulled back on his digital services tax, a terrible tax, but you'd think he'd get something in return for it. Nothing. And today, he removed even almost all of the tariffs on the United States and got none lifted from Canada. This continues with the weakness that he's shown on the world stage, continuing ahead with a $1 billion loan to the dictatorship in Beijing to build ships for Canada, creating jobs for foreign workers in steel and shipbuilding, while that same regime hits our farmers and fish harvesters with increasingly high and unfair tariffs. Mr. Carney's capitulations would be laughable if they weren't so tragic. They will harm our farmers, our workers, our people. More importantly, from his point of view, they are a broken promise. They are exactly the opposite of what Mr. Carney ran on. His signature promise in the last election was that he was going to put elbows up, negotiate a win, and match American tariffs. Let's go through the list. He's not thrown one elbow since he took office, except at our own workers. He did not meet his promise of a July 21st deal with the Americans. Again, his promise, not mine. He's backed down while claiming that he would stand up, and he's gotten absolutely nothing in return. In fact, American tariffs are twice as high on Canada today as they were when Prime Minister Carney took office, promising to deploy his negotiating skills to get us a win.
So his win was doubling what Justin Trudeau had. Justin Trudeau pissed off Donald Trump, and Mark Carney somehow was able to get those tariffs doubled. And not only that, the July 21st deadline was Mark Carney's. Then the August 1st one with Donald Trump, he also didn't hit that one either. Something very fishy's going on. Seems like Mark Carney doesn't want to get a deal because he wants that big, scary orange man bad for the next election.
He promised he would have elbows up. He promised he could, quote, handle Trump, and that he would, quote, negotiate a win. Those are his promises, and he needs to be judged by his word. And this was not any promise, just any old promise on page 73 of his platform. It was the promise on which he ran his entire election campaign. And now he's abandoning it. So either he admits that he was wrong all along, or that he knowingly spread falsehoods to get elected. He needs to explain which of those two things it is. But it adds to a long list of broken promises. Remember, he was going to build more and at faster speeds than ever before? Well, he's getting breathless media coverage because he's setting up a new office that will one day approve projects that may one day get built. 160 days in, and he's bragging that he's close to setting up a construction office of bureaucrats who don't swing hammers or operate heavy machinery, but sit in front of computer screens in Ottawa department buildings. Not one pipeline has been identified, not one LNG plant, not one nuclear plant, not one hydroelectricity dam. Not one major project has been identified, let alone approved, in the 160 days since he took office. And all of the anti-resource laws that will make them impossible to complete remain in place.
Basically, the only update we've had from that is I believe Tim Hodgson said the other day that in the fall, there's a good chance that they'll be able to start identifying these new projects. That's what he said, I believe, on his Twitter or somewhere the other day. They essentially have no plan to really identify anything.
On housing, he said he'd double home building. His housing agency says home building will drop by 13% over the next 2 years. And the housing crisis has tripled in its different directions. Under Trudeau, it was just that they were too expensive for anyone to buy. Now, it's too costly for builders to build, buyers to buy, or sellers to sell. An almost impossible triumvirate of failure in housing hell that only a Liberal Prime Minister could have accomplished. He said he would invest more and spend less. Well, look at the numbers. Spending is up 8% under Mr. Carney, and it looks like the deficit will be twice the one that Trudeau left behind.
So speaking of Trudeau, on CBC, they're desperately trying to save Mark Carney's image by blaming it all on Trudeau. This is not a joke. David Cochrane back from vacation. Here they are, blaming it all on Trudeau now.
Well, look, Hillary, earlier this year when the retaliatory tariffs were put in place by former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, the view and the hope was that, inflicting pain back on the United States as effectively as possible could help them see the error of their ways and lead to the end of this trade war as quickly as possible. The belief at the time was that this might have been a leverage play from the president to try to get some concessions on things such as defense spending and border security and any other number of things that had nothing to do with tariffs, and that if you satisfied those issues, things would go away. Well, a lot of effort's been made on those things. The tariffs are staying in place, and they've now gone global because it's become abundantly clear that President Trump is using these as leverage, but he also believes in imposing tariffs as a source of revenue for the American government as he tries to recalibrate the global trading system as it has existed for decades to be even more in the United States' favor and bring key industries back inside the U.S. borders.
So basically blaming Donald Trump and blaming Justin Trudeau. Trudeau brought them in to deal with Trump, and then Trump changed the game. It has nothing to do with Mark Carney. He's not responsible for anything. How are people not seeing through this crap? It's just pathetic. Moving back to Pierre's press conference here, they ask him about Mark Carney talking about Canada having the least punitive tariffs in the world right now. Carney was basically trying to take credit for that, even though he had nothing to do with that. And Pierre fact checks this hard.
Do you agree with the Prime Minister that despite the tariffs in place, Canada still has the least punitive trade arrangement with the United States of any major economy? And if not, can you think of a country or a bloc that has a better deal right now than Canada?
Most countries have a better deal in reality because none of them have the same dependency on the American economy we do. Yeah. So there's two parts to this. One, any access we have today is the result of Brian Mulroney. Let's be clear. There's not a single tariff-free item that's going to the United States that was not negotiated by Prime Minister Mulroney. I challenge anyone to go back and find an item that goes in tariff-free that was not originally included in FDA or NAFTA under Mulroney. So none of that is due to Mark Carney. I'm sorry, I know he likes to take credit for a lot of things. He can't take credit for what a prime minister did in the 1980s and 90s. The second, any small tariff on Canada, any amount, by the United States has an outsized effect because it represents 20%. 20% of our economy is export, more than 20% of our economy is exports to the United States, which means that we are the single most dependent country on the United States, and any tariff at all will have more impact on our country than it does anywhere in the world. We should have tariff-free access to the United States as we had before. And that's what Mr. Carney promised when he said he would negotiate a win by July 21st. He should have delivered on his promise.
That's checkmate, mic drop. Mark Carney knew what he was doing when he was using his wording saying, we've got the best deal, we've got the best deal, kind of implying he's in that position as prime minister, thus we have the best deal. It must have been because of him, and Pierre fact-checking here. Brian Mulroney, speaking of Brian Mulroney, it's just sad too, this timing of Stephen Guilbeault, Parks Canada, trying to change the rules, adding 25 years to any deceased prime minister and not honoring them, and Brian Mulroney being the first one on that list. Now, they have flip-flopped on that recently, but you just know if they kept that in, they would have once again flip-flopped that rule again once Chrétien goes on to the nether realm, because Chrétien's like, 92 years old? Everything the Liberals do is just like corrupt and broken. Got this one from Blacklock's reporter, widening the tax auditor's power. Of course they want to do that. So the proposal here they're putting forward here, the proposed amendments are intended to enhance efficiency and effectiveness of tax audits. Well, what are they talking about? Tax filers face $50 a day fines and mandatory oaths under the threat of perjury for failing to cooperate with the Canada Revenue Agency. Finance Minister Francois Philippe Champagne outlined the proposals on Friday. This is ridiculous. If you hear all the stories of the CRA trying to get money from Canadians that they don't have the right to get, fake, misinformed tax audits, and then they want to impose a $50 a day fine when the CRA is already accidentally, illegally trying to get random $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 from people. There's so many cases I've heard of this. I personally know people who have gone through this where the CRA says, hey, you owe us 15 grand, and they say, no, I don't. And then they go away. Like, what is that? New provisions would allow the revenue agency to compel tax filers to swear an oath under threat of perjury. Amendments would also allow revenue agency to issue a new type of notice referred to as the notice of non-compliance to a person who has not complied with the requirements of notice to provide assistance or information issued by the agency. So it goes on to say here, so this $50 a day notice is outstanding to a maximum of $25,000. How many days is that? That works out to be 500 days or about a year and a half. This is just more government overreach, like just ridiculous crap coming from the Liberals. Moving ahead, we've got Mario with this one. Nova Scotia treats their construction workers like second-class citizens. You need to work over 110 hours in 2 weeks in order to be considered for overtime pay.
Very, very difficult to surprise me or shock me. Just when I think I've seen it all, someone messaged me and he said, Mario, do me a favor, look into Nova Scotia. Look into what they consider overtime wages for construction workers. I have to work over 110 hours in a 2-week period in order to then qualify for overtime. I didn't believe it at first. I said there's absolutely no way. So I went on the government website of Nova Scotia that talks about construction and construction workers. See, there's a section called overtime pay. Construction workers are entitled to be paid overtime after they have worked for 110 hours over 2 weeks. So you can literally work 70 hours 1 week, go back to normal hours, do 40 hours that week, and you don't get a single dollar extra for overtime pay for that 1 week that you had to work 70 hours. I'd like to understand from anyone, please explain it to me like I'm 5 years old. How is this normal? How does this make any sort of sense in today's society? For a country that is apparently so progressive, we are taking advantage of the people who are the blue-collar workers, the backbone of this country, that literally build the things we work in, we live in. This is insane.
This is a good point. It's the progressives are taking advantage of the citizens.
It needs to be repealed. And if you agree with me, try to contact his office, Tim Houston. This is the Premier of Nova Scotia. He's the person that is able to make this change. Also, you should email and contact your local member of provincial parliament and let them know that this shouldn't be happening to any Canadian under any industry, especially for construction workers who work brutally hard in some awful conditions. I work with some of these construction workers. I hire them. I know what they go through. I worked alongside them. They are there under minus 40-degree weather. They're there getting heat strokes. And you're telling me that they're not entitled to overtime?
And considering we need construction workers badly, this needs to be changed.
If they work 70 hours 1 week, even 80 hours 1 week, and they drop down back to 30, they get nothing extra. It's an old, outdated system. It needs to change. Please help these people.
Tim Houston's not going to do anything. That guy doesn't care. All he cares about is banning people from walking in the forest. Something I've been thinking about recently is, when is Mark Carney's book coming out? It was supposed to be out in July. Actually, it was supposed to be out in May. Then he delayed it to July. And this is his second book. It's this one, The Hinge, Time to Build an Even Better Canada. Isn't this funny how this lines up with his whole thing right now, his whole shtick? And then don't worry, Brookfield's right there with all the construction and materials and supplies, all that green goodness to build Canada even better. So I wonder what his book has to say. It's funny, a 3.67 rating based on 2 reviews. Considering the book is not out, what I have seen is the book is not coming out January 2nd, 2079. It's coming out in January of next year. That's when apparently it is slated to now be released. So I wonder if this corresponds with potentially a snap election. I don't know. This is very bizarre, this whole book and the timing of this. Next up, we've got this Surrey car wash business pew-pewed and vandalized. So they speak Punjabi the entire time here, but owner says he got a call 2 days earlier demanding $50K. Extortion cases in Surrey have now risen to 28 this year, with 23 tied to extortion-related pew-pew under investigation, according to SPS. What is this? Canada becoming an extortion hub now? NDP fundraising for the next election? That's hilarious. That's a joke, obviously. Canada has approved entry for more than 17,600 people with a criminal record in the last decade. That sums it up right there. We shouldn't be surprised with the results we're getting.